I churned all of my clients. And today I want to tell you exactly why I did that. And if you don't know about me, my name is Frankie Marayan. I own an email, an SMS, and retention marketing agency for e commerce owners. And today I want to tell you again how I churned my clients. So in February 2024, I have to give you the backstory of how I even got here. I was working two tech jobs. I was making, pretty decent money for my age. I'm 25 now. And, I just thrown my mom a surprise party that, I knew she'd always kind of want. I was able to, give out gifts to my family, to my father, and do things economically that I, quite frankly, always dreamed about doing. Like when you have enough money, what do? You spoil your family. I mean that's the goal, right? To make sure that everyone's taken care of. So I wasn't rich though. Like don't get me wrong, by any means I was not rich, but I was able to do things that I always wanted to do for people, and yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time, but I knew that I knew that this isn't where I wanted to end, right? Like I'd never been that corporate type of guy. Like I hated clocking in, clocking out, doing stuff on other people's time. I hated doing that from the corporate aspect. But in the background, I faced like some pretty huge debt. So like I was forced to I wouldn't say I was forced. I would say I chosen the option to go corporate in order to pay off my debt. I knew it would take decades. That's why I always kind of had like a business on the side, in order to. That was like my get out of jail free card, right? But I was like two years removed from college, and I just hated it, and I just said fuck it, right? And before I said fuck it, I was actually laid off of both of the jobs last year. And luckily, I always had like a business on the side, so I just knew I was gonna go all in into the business. I had four or five failed businesses, or they're not really failed, right? You always learn from them and then you move forward. So it's not technically a failure, but I had four to five businesses that never really amounted to anything, right? Like I owned an empanada business when I was 16 with my friends, Chris and Rasan. I own a pay per lead agency with Adonis for real estate. I owned or I started up. What else did we start up? Man, we started up a real estate wholesaling business like three times. Never ended up closing on anything. Um, I started up many businesses. I started up a flipping business, tried to raise capital to flip. And I never stuck with it long enough to actually get results from it, economic results. But I did learn specific universal laws around that. I even started up a CRM and automation business. I forgot about that. That was like the last one before this agency, right? So as you can see, like I learned and I've tried my hand at entrepreneurship really pretty much ever since I was around 15, 16, you know. But luckily through this process, I learned a universal law between them. And that universal law between all of those failed businesses, ideas, and trials and errors was, sell to people what they want and what they know they need. I'm going to say that again. Sell to people what they want or what they know they need. Now, there are many other laws that I learned, but the key here that I want to, shine light on today is, sell to people what they know they need. And this is the easiest way to break into a market and get sales. Like I didn't follow this principle at all when just starting any of my businesses when I was, younger. It was just like, hey, this seems like a good idea. Let's do it. Without really understanding the principle of personas, ICPs, ideal customer profiles or our ideal client profile. I didn't understand that, right? And my last business of AI and automations and like CRM automations, which was like when I got laid off of my first job, back in January, February 2024, was to do just that. I came from, I wasn't really technical. I just kind of like got my way into a technical job. And essentially, when I was first released into the wild, like full time, I was just attempting to sell AI chatbots to real estate agents. I hired cold callers. I cold called myself to try to sell this service. But, I also learned another law about that, which is, you don't hire people to do a job for you if you don't understand how to do the fucking job yourself. I'll get into that another time, but you need to be just as good when you're hiring people, or hire someone that's an expert if you want to completely step away from that. So, story for a different day. But essentially, I started to get traction with the AI automations and the CRM automations. But something I didn't realize was I was selling to people something that they wanted, right? Like it was a nice to have. It wasn't needed though, right? So there's thresholds and wants. So like something they want is because everyone has it, right? AI chatbots, at least at that time, that was a nice to have for agents, right? Like they didn't need it, or they didn't even want it, right? Like some wanted it, but they didn't really see the ROI on, AI chatbots, AI automations. And again, part of that is on me for not being able to show them the ROI for, having AI chatbots in their business. But I also understood, like, my ICP, I just chose the wrong ICP, right? Which was real estate agents. A lot of real estate agents are, they don't have a lot of money. And the ones that do, the brokerages supply them a majority of all that tech stack and all those technologies. So that was ideally supposed to be the ICP. If I were to stay in that niche and vertical, it was going to be real estate agents that maybe list X amount of houses per month or per year, or make amount of money X per month per year, or brokerages that are in this vicinity of revenue or threshold or awards. That would have been a better ICP than just general real estate agents. I'm gonna sell you an AI chatbot, or I'm gonna sell you AI automations. That just does not work out. It never works out. It might work out for someone, but it didn't work out for me. So I needed to switch from just a broad audience to a more niche down, just vertical and persona and ICP, right? Not too niche where I have to be too specialized, but broad and niche enough where not only is the offer something they need, but it's something they can also afford at the same time, right? To actually purchase. So that kind of leads me into why I'm talking to you today, of choosing the correct ICP and why my customers churn. So, anyways, like I started marketing for email and SMS. My friend came to me. He has an e-commerce store, and I actually was doing cold email before I was doing email and SMS marketing for e-commerce brands. And he asked me, "Hey man, I see you doing cold email. Like, can you do email for my e-commerce store?" And I said, "Hell yeah, I can." Not knowing darn well I did not know anything about email and SMS. So this was back in around 2024, in September 2024. And essentially, I got pretty good with cold email, with setting up like the technical side, like the DNS settings, the DKIM, DMARC, SPF, understanding deliverability, understanding, spam words, spin tags, copywriting for B2B. This, email and SMS marketing for e-commerce involves more B2C. So that was something that I had to learn on the fly too as well. And so, you know, my friend told me like, "Hey man, like I want you to do this," and I ended up doing it. Started learning all about it. It was pretty easy to set up, essentially, but understanding the fundamentals was that ongoing process. And pretty much, I realized that this was a service that everyone needed. Like this was a need. This ICP of e-commerce stores, they need this. They need email and SMS marketing. So when they market, it doesn't just essentially go on the back end. Like it's for nothing, because if they market on the front end with ads or affiliate marketing, they come to their store. But what happens? Like how do you get repurchases, right? Like how do you get people to come back to your store? Are you going to retarget them with ads? You can't always do that. That costs a lot more money compared to email and SMS or push notifications. So, I realized this was a need, and boom, I had my ideal market in a sense, and I had my offer. Reading Alex Hormozy's $100 million offers definitely helped me, build out my lead magnets and everything in between. But I was halfway there. And then reading Alex Hormozy's book, I niched down and said, "Hey, I'm targeting e-commerce stores that were doing, you know, upwards of 20K a month. I just said anything, 20K a month, not knowing that typically those companies or those brands, they don't really have the margins. It's rare that they have the margins to afford an outside service to go and outsource to, right? Like it's very rare. And because, e-commerce can range, the margins can range anywhere from 10, 15, 20, 30, sometimes even 40, sometimes even 50%. But when fuel start involving ads and all that, that starts trimming off some of the margin, some of the good meat there for them to pause, for them to essentially, profit on. So through doing this, it was pretty cool. So I started in September and I got up to five, six clients. And, one of those clients were a big e-commerce brand, or I wouldn't say big. They were the biggest e-commerce brand I dealt with. They were doing, close to 90 to 100K per month. But, there was just that one issue. A majority of my clients were making at or under 20K a month. I thought this was enough, but it's not. So again, why did they churn? It's because the margin or piece of it is the margin, right? The margin was not great enough for them to support my services, so they slowly started dropping off because they are still in that growth phase of the business. They're still in that like product validation side. They're not on the scaling side yet. That's what they're trying to get to. And so I realized that plays a huge impact into my agency too as well. You always deliver a great service. That is the number one, my number one rule, at least when it comes to agency. Deliver a great service and people will tell your friends. So through those five, six clients, all those were through referrals. Like I did a good job for one of the clients, and then they started referring people over to me, and that was pretty cool. I also did realize that you don't always want to rely on referrals. You want to make sure you have a pipeline that's wet. So because if the pipeline is wet, it'll never go dry essentially, unless it'll never go dry by you marketing out to people if you're doing outreach consistently. Compared to referrals, referrals dry up, you're cooked. So, where was I at? So essentially, where I was at with these clients was, they started dropping off a little bit, and I was delivering service to them. And then also I realized was when you're at that specific level, when you're targeting more clients that are making less money compared to the bigger ones, making 100K plus per month, you know, it's tougher for you to afford better talent, right? And so I believe in having great just customer service, operations, onboarding experience. I want to make it unique to my business. My business is called Embrace the Potential, ETP Tech. And our whole goal is to set ourselves apart, not just from the onboarding experience, but the actual personal experience that they deal with on a day to day working with us. And I realized in order to afford better talent, you need to have better margins on my side, right? So I can afford to pay people, um, you know, experts or people that are great at what they do. It's harder to do that when you're targeting an ICP that you're charging $1,500 a month on. Some people can get it done, but in my line of services, I noticed that's not the case, right? Like people are paying people a good amount of money to make sure they deliver outstanding customer service, outstanding technical service, everything in between. I've done it myself for the most part, but how we grow and how we scale is by making sure we hire great talent. But I can't do that if on the front end I am targeting people that can't service that cost, right? So the 100K a month client, that was a great example of me. Um, I realized I needed to raise my prices because the 100K a month client, it was an experience where we made them a great amount of money. We made them a 22x within 8 weeks our on our service. So we generated for them 60K in 8 weeks for them, and we only charged them $1,500 at the time, right? So yeah, that's where I realized, and that was $1,500 per month. That's when I realized that in order to compete with the bigger agencies and actually work with bigger clients, I need to raise my prices so I can service all clients like that at better, right? Even better. because I truly believe we could have got to 80K, 100K, just in 8 weeks if I charge more. So this is all on my end, right? But here's what I learned. So number one, from charging more, the reason and why I should do that is because you can service better, right? And by servicing better, you get better referrals, you get more referrals, and you set yourself apart. And number two, I learned that, sometimes it's about who you're targeting. Actually, no, it's all the time about who you're targeting. And by you targeting a specific ICP and persona, that directly plays and kind of have ripples effects in your business, in your operations, and how you deal with clients, right? So I realize, do I want to service a bunch of fish, right? Or do I want to service, just a minute amount of fish, right? The fish being clients, and um, having it be bigger fish, right? And Alex Ramosi, Matthew Larson, Charlie Morgan, they all talk about that. Whereas like the way you get rich or the way you get money is like servicing the rich, right? And then you can provide services for people that are might not be able to afford your services. And don't get me wrong, like I have lead magnets, I have certain things that people can, or I have communities where people can buy to get into, if they can't afford my services, and that's another story for a different day. But yeah, like in order for me to scale to my goal, 40K a month, MRR, I have to service bigger clients and raise my prices. And I'll tell you a story about another day when I got a chance to audit an 8-figure brand, and essentially, the guy was charging like $7,500 a month, and I was charging 1,500. That was like a huge reckoning for me. So yeah, charge more, charge more, but deliver a great service, and realize that those bigger companies like Deloitte, McKinsey, KPMG, EY, the reason they get big, the reason it, they can not only just service, the 8, 9 billion dollar companies, is because their revenue per employee is like 2x minimum, you know, right? So like these consulting companies, even the ones you don't hear about, they work with the top brass because not only do they have the talent, but they have the margins to go and get the talent, right? So, just some food for thought for myself that I realized and I reckoned over the past couple of months. And again, I'm not saying that I wouldn't work with smaller companies. It's just in order to provide the service I know that ETP Tech can provide, we have to charge more and we have to choose our ICP better in order to start competing with the bigger companies, right? So yeah, my new ICP, I actually came upon the decision to service clients that are making at least $1 million a year. So e-commerce brands that are making over $1 million a year, that's who I'm choosing to work with. And obviously they have to have more than one product because it's email and SMS marketing. You gotta be able to market different things. So the summary of this video is my clients churn, and they churn because they not only could they not afford my services, but because I chose my ICP wrong, right? My rates were too high for them at the time, and that was low. That was like very low ticket. So if my rates were too high for them at the time, like I would have to service hundreds of clients in order just to make my target of 40K MRR, 100K MRR, which is my main goal, and if I switch to my ICP now of $1 million a year, idealistically, they'll have the amount of margins to be able to afford my new rates. You know, so yeah, that's the story of why my clients churn and what I'm doing about it. Hopefully, this video was informative to other e-commerce agencies out there, or other agencies just in general. And if you're an e-commerce brand that is doing D2C, then hit me up if you need email, SMS, and or retention tactics or services. So yeah, hopefully you guys have a good day. Stay safe and stay dangerous.